Hello, guys. Let's get the waiting room out of there. There should be a question that you can start to work on as we wait for people to come. We are doing harder stuff today, so this one might already kind of throw you into the deep end here, but that's okay. So just give it a look as you start off. And at the very least, something like this, the topic should be familiar. So that would be the hope, is that you can at least see that. So as you're thinking about this one, this is a little bit of a do now, and feel free to stare at it and see what you've got. I will say that today is going to be harder. Today's theme here is sacrifices. We talked last time about master the middle. These are both very important steps for everyone, master the middle, right? But to summarize last time, we were really focused on those easy and medium questions, maybe ones that had a little bit of a twist or a common trap or something that we might think is hard, but is very predictable in certain ways. And so those are the kinds of questions that we really don't want to get wrong because we know what's coming. The SAT is never going to ask us the same thing twice, exactly the same way, at least not for medium level questions, but they are going to ask us the same topics. They are going to try to throw the same traps and same curveballs at us. So we know what to expect. Then today, we're going to talk about some of the hardest level questions, those ones that in math at least are going to be near the end of the module. Because math, remember, is organized from easy to hard. So we have this ability to know where we should start to expect a lot of traps and things like that. And even in the hard module, those first five or so questions should be pretty easy. And then really at number 15 in both modules is where we really should expect things to get kicked up a notch. So this would absolutely be one of those last few questions, 21, 22. And it might be one that you don't bother with. That's okay. That's going to be the kind of moral of the story for today is we're going to do a lot of weird things, and hopefully some of it you can remember, learn some moves that might help you on some of these hard ones. But if you come away from one of these questions going, there's no freaking way I will ever get this, that's okay. That's fine. Because at the end of the day, it's better to spend your time on the questions that you have the best chance of getting right. And so what we really want to make sure we're doing is focusing the time there. And I would rather for these 15 to 22, these hard questions in the math module, that's eight of them, I believe, rather than do a bad job at all eight, right? Try to pick the four that you know you have the best shot of getting right for various reasons. Maybe it's a strategy question. Maybe it's just something you understand pretty well. Maybe it's a topic that you know better than others, whatever it may be. Find the four that you are going to be able to do confidently and spend your time there and just guess randomly on the others. So that way you are getting the best chance at the most points. That's really the goal here. So some of you are already working on this, got some answers. It's pretty good. There's lots of ways to solve it. Um, if you have no clue, I will give you a little bit of a hint, is I'm always thinking for math, PPIE. And what do they give me? Well, they give me an equation. I know it's not much of one, but it's an equation. And these are points, right? This is function notation. So it's written in a weird way, but in a certain way, these are points. So I have the most basic building blocks for even a hard math question. So this would be one where I'd at least have a step one. I don't know if step two, step three are going to work out, but sometimes with math, especially on the SAT, it's important to just try step one and see what happens. So keep thinking about that. I'm going to keep talking about other things as an intro here. Hopefully, you guys saw that I added a feature. I posted in here that there was a new feature. If you go to the practice tab now for the portal, the homework portal, you will see that at bottom underneath the filters is this questions from class button. And this has every question that we have done in class. And they're all just listed in kind of order. So you can go back and look at anything that we've done and be able to, I just showed the answer there. You should be able to go back and see what's going on with these and see anything that you got wrong. And especially with today, where we know that things are going to get hard and my explanations might be fast. I want to get to a lot of questions. So if you do feel like you missed something, remember the recording will be there. So you'll be able to watch the questions again. And you can always go back and look at it yourself again and see what's going on with the question. So you can see what you put. You can see if you got it right or wrong. Most of these are blank because it's my version of that, but there you go. So that's all good stuff. So Since I did spoil it, I don't know if anyone saw that, but I'm going to get started here because I do think there's lots of ways to do it. I'll show you a couple ways, but one that I definitely would want to start with is, like I said, plug points into equations. This would be a question as well that I would target, right? So let's say this is number 20 in that zone. If I get to 15, I'm starting to skip around. I'm starting to look for things that I think are good targets. And as soon as I see this, I'd be like, ooh, points and equations. That's probably a good target. Let's see what happens if I take this k, which is an x value, and put it in for the x values, right? K is x. So that just means ak squared plus bk plus c. And the y value I don't really have, but I can see that this is equal to the same thing when I put 2k in for x, right? So let's do that too, right? So a and then 2k squared plus b 2k plus c. So I already see a couple good things are going to happen. One of them is that the c's will cancel, right? If I subtract c from both sides, they're just going to go away. So that's cool. Then let's clean this up a bit. So I get ak squared plus bk equals 4k squared a, oh boy, plus 2 bk. In fact, I should probably switch this just so that I have some consistency. So let's switch that. Put things in alphabetical order for ak squared. Now, out of habit, I'm going to start combining things, I guess, right? So if I combine like terms, minus ak squared and minus bk, right? So this is not a hard move. I know there's a lot of letters, but this is a standard algebra move. You got things that look similar, bring them together. And plus, since we got a squared, another good move is make it equal to 0. So now we have 3ak squared plus bk. And again, this is weird, but not that weird as if I have a quadratic and I have it equal to 0 factor. So what's common to these terms? Well, I have a k for sure that I can factor out, and that leaves me with 3ak plus b. And since I'm trying to find a possible value of k, right? Well, it looks like k could be 0. So that would be nice if that was an answer, but obviously they're not that generous. But remember, the point of factoring is that these things are going to be separate equations, basically, that are each equal to 0. So I divide them up, and this one is easy to solve. But now this one is its own little mini equation equal to 0. And because there's no squared anymore, this becomes fairly basic algebra. 3ak equals negative b, divide by 3a, divide by 3a. And I'm not going to write it again. K is negative b over 3a. So yeah, I mean, gosh, this is really hard. But one thing we talked about last week too, with how does the SAT make easy questions into medium questions into hard questions, is they just take a bunch of topics and start smushing them together into one big thing. And if we really examine this question, there's nothing really that crazy here individually, right? Plugging a point in for x using function notation, it's kind of basic algebra 2. Combining like terms, basic algebra. Solving a quadratic, that's also in that algebra 2 zone. The thing that makes it hard is that we don't have a lot of letters here. So that maybe makes me think, could we go to Desmos and start doing stuff? Maybe. The problem with arithmetizing here, which remembers our strategy where you just make up numbers for some of these constants, is that we have to make sure we follow this condition that there's two values that are equal to each other. So f of k is equal to f of 2k. I forget if this is going to work, so I might screw this up, but let's do it anyway. What I might think of in that situation is if a place where I know that a parabola, let me draw it, has two values that kind of equal, that I have a known symmetry, I guess, right? The same y value is it's the x-intercepts, right? So whatever this value is, right? Let's say this is k and this is 2k. They're going to have the same y value because they're both the x-axis. So we could maybe do something with this. I'm genuinely unsure if this is going to work. I forget. These questions all blur together for me. So let's give it a go, right? Let's just say k is 1. And that means This is 2. So we could say something like that's x minus 1, x minus 2 is my quadratic. So that's x squared minus 3x plus 2 if I try to get it in this standard form. So k is 1. All right. And we need to get a possible value of k. I don't think this is going to work because A, B, and C are non-zero constants. So if we did choice A, negative -3 over 3 times 1, that's 3 over 3 is 1. That does work, right? Because that gives me the k that I started with. So that works. B would be -3 over 2. That doesn't work. C would be 4 times A, so 4 minus 6 plus 2. Nope. And right, because that's -2 plus 2 is 0. So that's not part of this. And then D is 4AC minus B. So 4 times 1 times 2 is 4 times 2 plus 3. That's not going to work either. So that somehow worked. I don't know if that was just lucky, but it goes to show you something that I do want to make sure I emphasize tonight, which is I don't know what I'm doing sometimes. And I think that just comes with the territory. I know that's not something you want to hear your teacher say, is I don't know what I'm doing. But it's true. I have been tutoring the SAT since 2006. That's a long time. That's 3 different versions of the SAT, I want to say. One, two, three. And that's a lot. And the test has changed. The topics really haven't, but the test has changed. But even still, as many SATs as I've seen, as many thousands of questions as I've seen, every time I still take an SAT, I see things I've never seen before. At least in the big picture of I've never seen a question like this before. You will probably never see a question exactly like this again, but the underlying topics are the same. And a bigger picture idea we want to get across tonight is that there are certain moves that work. And a big problem with the way that math is taught in school is that sometimes you guys don't remember or aren't taught moves. You're taught steps. You're said, okay, if you're given these specific things, you do this step 1, this step 2, this step 3, this step 4, and out pops the answer. And some of you are very good at memorizing steps. But the SAT is not going to just test that kind of level of memorization. They're also testing cleverness, your ability to solve a puzzle, to think outside the box. And so I have certain moves, certain tools that I know tend to work in certain situations, but I don't know for sure if they'll work. And I really just try them out and see what happens. And I think I just showed here that a little bit of an arithmetize did end up working. And my reason for trying it would be I would look at this question and go, oh my God, there's a lot of letters. That's horrible. Let's see if we can make some of them disappear. Generally, that's a good move for algebra situations. You got a lot of letters, make them go away, right? Even here, even in the plug points and equations, right? When I got rid of C, it's same idea. It's getting rid of letters. If I was one less letter, that's one less thing to worry about. So that's what I want you to take away from tonight. Even if you find that every single one of these questions is really hard, the moves that we use on the hard ones will work on some of these medium and easy ones too. So this plug points and equations idea is so fundamental. We really want to make sure we've got that. Now, let me give you one that I wasn't going to do this, but let's do it anyway. It's almost identical at first glance, right? There's that f of k, f of 2k. So we might be able to do the same thing, but notice there's other things going on in this one. So there might be other solutions that really work. Um, but it goes to show too that, I don't know, there's a lot of these questions do look the same, even though it's just the topic that's the same, I guess. So give it a shot, see what you can come up with. It's not going to be all math. Don't worry. I have some passages that are pretty tough that we'll do as well, but that's the plan for tonight. Weird math, annoying passages, the stuff where we might need to make choices on the test about what we cover. I see some bookmarks already. That's fine. But try some things, right? Don't just stare at it. Don't just be like, oh, can't do it. So that you don't have to do the algebra from before if you want. PPIE, right? What did we have? We had AK squared plus BK plus C is equal to 4AK squared plus 2BK plus C, right? That's the same thing as we did before. And there is a formula for the sum of the zeros of a quadratic. I don't think we necessarily need it, but might be helpful. If anyone knows it, feel free to give it to the chat. The sum of the zeros. That's it. Thank you, Amin. Negative b over a. And this gets us to plug points in equations in another way because we get the sum of the zeros is 18, right? So 18. And I think that if you're stuck still, I would try to see if you can use this formula. I know I had to remind you of it. Maybe it's a good one to file away for the SAT. The odds of you really definitely needing it for a question are pretty slim, but certainly it can help on some hard ones. But the benefit of this formula is look at how few things it involves, right? I mean, compare that to what I wrote above it. This is just really just two pieces and a number. That's pretty good because it allows us to start to make some kind of connections here. And if you think you've got a good way to solve it, some of you do have answers already, feel free to put it in the chat. You can do a private chat. I'm just curious. There might be ways of solving this that I've never thought of. That's one other thing about a lot of these quadratic ones is all of the different rules for quadratics they're all derived from each other. So the relationship between the zeros and the standard form here and the factored form, vertex, all these things are related. So that really helps us. That can help us recognize that there might not be one path to the answer. If we go down a path, then it might intersect with another path. And so the first idea you have might be a good one. But I don't know that anyone wants to share with me. So I'm going to start moving things around here. So negative b is equal to 18a, or b is equal to negative 18a, right? Those are both maybe better ways of thinking about this because b being equal to negative 18a, I like that, right? That means I can get rid of a letter. And remember before what happened is when we started combining terms, we got rid of the c, right? So that was pretty cool. And if we do it again, let's just kind of write it over here, right? We could minus this. So minus AK squared minus BK. 0 is equal to 3AK squared plus BK. But now we have this ability to get rid of this A, or at least start to think about this A in a different way, because B we can put in there. Um, so B is equal to 3A, or sorry, B is equal to negative 18A. So we could do that minus 18AK. And suddenly that factoring that we did before starts to be even better than it was. In fact, I don't really need to factor if I don't want to, because I can just add this over. So let's do that. 18 AK equals 3 AK squared. Divide by A crosses the A's out. Divide by K crosses one of the K's out on this side. So we're left with 18 is equal to 3K. And if we divide by 3, hey, what do you know? K is 6. And that is the answer. K is 6. I have a feeling some of you got that really fast and faster than I would have probably gotten it if I went this route. So I'm curious if you want to share, feel free. I'd be curious if someone got it a different way. There are ways to kind of maybe think about this a little bit and realize, oh, I know one of them, but I don't, this is my plug points into equation is taking over. But one thing is if we assume that these are the solutions, right? It's K plus 2K is equal to 18. So we can get to that 3K equals 18 much faster than I did. That makes me a little nervous because I'd be like, well, how do I know that the K and the 2K are the solutions? I don't know that for sure, but it really doesn't actually matter because a parabola is symmetrical. And that's one of the things that we can do with parabolas is we can think about them as very equally balanced. And so that's another property that can help. And you guys have worked with parabolas enough that yes, you probably know all the things. Where do I get the 4AK squared plus 2BK? This was me here doing f of 2K, kind of like I did before. So if I put 2K in for the X, right, 2K squared would be 4K squared. So that's where those two pieces come from. And then 2K here times B is the 2BK. Good question. Are there any other questions about these? Again, I don't want you to feel bad if you're like, this is way over my head, right? Take the little pieces of information that come with these, right? It's not about necessarily knowing exactly all of the steps here. Again, we're not trying to memorize steps. We're trying to memorize little pieces and have different moves we can make. And with quadratics, I would say a nice little piece, a nice little move that can help is the sum of the zeros, the sum of the x-intercepts being negative b over a. That might come in handy. If they say sum of the zeros, the first thing I might do is write that formula on my page and just be like, okay, let's see if I can use it, right? Let's get that building block out of my brain and onto the page and start trying stuff and just see what happens. So yeah. Any other thoughts on this one though? No one wants to share a little special solution? Okay, fine. I see how it is. Let's do one more math before we switch to reading for a little bit. Let's do, let's do, all right, let's do this. Yeah. And so if I saw this would still be in that kind of hard range, 15 to 22 of a math section, I'd probably target it, right? It's a lot less to read than some of the others, so that's a good start. And if you still think it's hard, feel free to bookmark. That's fine. But I think the bookmarks are especially important today because again, the point of what we're talking about is sacrifices. What would be the things that if I only had a couple minutes left and I had all these hard questions staring me down, what would I be doing? Which ones would I target? Just to go in order and say, okay, I'm going to do them in the order they present them. That's not smart. That's not efficient. And that's going to cost more points than it saves. So being able to make choices is good. So if you look at something and you're like, this is a good one for me. I feel confident in that answer. That's great. If you're bookmarking it, then maybe it goes a little bit later in the order of events. That's fine. This would definitely be one I would target. And like I said, it would probably be number like 18, let's say, out of 22. Remember two things about proving answers versus thinking about answers. Give it another 30 seconds here. Okay. And we talk about sacrifices too. What I mean by that is we want to sacrifice, we're thinking more about sacrificing in terms of time and points. And the worst case scenario is if we sacrifice the time and do commit to a question and then we don't get the points. So for like half of you, this was a waste. And I'm going to be a little harsh here. You cannot get this wrong. Cannot. This is a hard question. And so if you got an answer like C within 2 seconds, 5 seconds, you got to know that something's up. That's suspicious. Why would a hard question have such an easy answer? Maybe it truly does. Maybe you are just that smart, but probably not. And so that probably means you're falling for something. So they're giving me a rectangle and they're telling me its length is X. Wow, that X doesn't matter, right? It carries through into the choices. This is an amazing arithmetize opportunity, right? Get some numbers in there. So let's say what? The X, that's 10, right? That's my length. The length of this thing is 10, right? Let's just make a number up so we can have a rectangle here, right? So what's the width that goes with that? The length is 5 more than the width. The width is 5, right? So what's the perimeter then? We'll just add them all up, right? So it's a rectangle, so it's even. So that's 20 plus another 10, right? So that's 30. So if you put C, right, what does that mean? That means you're doing 4 times 10 plus 10. That's 50. No. But if we did 4 times 10, which is 40 minus 10, there's my 30. That works. And we can see the other choices. B actually does work. That's funny. I didn't think about that. So B works as well, right? 2 times 10 is 20, plus 10 is also 30. So we would need to choose another number to deal with that. But at the very least, we would have gotten rid of A and C. And C is absolutely the trap answer here. Because most of you are going to read this as X. You're going to say, this is wrong, but you're going to say that my length is 10 and my width is 5 more, right? X plus 5. But you're reading it wrong. The length is, you're backwards here. If the length is 5 more than the width, and X is defined as the length, right? Don't we have to realize then that this is going to mean that we have to do X minus 5? The width is 5 less than the length, right? They wrote it to get you to put the plus 5, but it's really a minus 5, the way they've described things. And look, this is maybe 15 words, this thing, right? That's a short question. This is meant to make you feel really good about your answer. And just like that, they can get you. Remember, they're doing that. And in math, we have the advantage that they're putting the questions in order of difficulty. So we know that a number 18 should be hard. If it feels really easy, you gotta be nervous and say, why am I getting this question right so quickly, right? Or am I falling for a trap? And so that hopefully gets you to second guess in a good way and do some sort of strategy. Because when I arithmetize, it may feel like I'm wasting my time. I'm spending time doing something that feels obvious. I can just look at this question. The answer is obvious. But no, the whole point of arithmetizing is recognizing that our logic about certain situations is often flawed. The SAT is writing the question knowing that we will think about it wrong and trying to lure us in. So the arithmetize is not a waste of time. It is a way of sacrificing a little bit of time to guarantee that we get points that we know we deserve, right? That's the key here. That's why this is such a bad mistake. This is not a question you would want to get wrong. You've got to remember this is not just a math test. This is a test of your problem solving ability, and they're absolutely trying to scam you a little bit. So, got to see that coming. Are there questions on that? This is a good example, yeah, of a sacrifice that you wouldn't want to make for points or time. You'd want to be able to get this. And even if you understand this XX minus 5 thing, I don't care because even I understand it, but I'm nervous that I do. So that's why I'm arithmetizing is I don't trust myself. I know that there are certain places in the test where I can't trust myself. Cool. Okay, let's switch gears then. We'll come back to some math, but let's do some passages. All right, let's do this one first. Yeah, let's do this one first. And the thing with passages is we are probably going to run out of time on the hard module for reading. I run out of time even after all this time doing these SATs. I still am, it's about 50-50 whether I have to guess randomly on a question or two. So making choices about which kinds of questions you like and don't, that can be really important. So this is one of those support versus weaken questions. I tend to like these. Some people don't, but give it a shot. See if you can maybe come up with a dumb summary really fast, sort through these longish answer choices really fast. And remember, I think it's really good to have some sort of dumb summary, especially when the answer choices are long, because it makes it so that you can hunt for a specific idea while you're going through those choices. And remember, too, that this one is asking to support. That's the traditional thing that they want, but they could sometimes ask us to weaken it, right? So my dumb summary here is just As there are more streetcars, there's more commuting. That seems to be what they're saying, right? The development of electric streetcar networks transformed residential patterns. This person says that the streetcar systems prompted working class families to abandon traditional neighborhood based employment in favor of jobs that required commuting. So there might be some pieces of this that I'm missing. Maybe I'm simplifying it too much, but that's kind of the point of the dumb summary, just to get something in there. And really, you want that something to be a relationship, right? So I love the arrows, I love the equal sign. I love to think of the passages really just as very long math equations, essentially. So that kind of helps me. And then if I needed to flip it, right, if they said what weakens the claim, then I might say something like somehow the streetcar either led to a decrease in commuting, or maybe it didn't. I could basically negate this in two ways. I could make this arrow go down, or I could turn this into a not equal sign, right? There's two ways I could flip it and still be looking for something specific, but that doesn't apply here. So if I go through the choices, I'm really just trying to see, do they match this in any way? After 1885, city directories show a steady decline in the number of small neighborhood businesses, such as local bakeries and tailors in areas where working class families resided. So does that mean there was less commuting because they're going to the bakery in a different place? Honestly, I don't know. And that's another piece of this too, is as we get to the harder questions, you're going to have these I don't know moments a lot. Don't cross it out, but don't pick it either. Just leave it aside. I don't know what that means. I think I've got to just see what else I've got. Maybe I need to put more thought into that, but a lot of times my move is just put things aside and we'll worry about it later. So a motivated laziness. Looking at B, working class families in cities with established streetcar networks were significantly more likely to have multiple wage earners per household than families in cities without such transportation systems. So this is saying you increase the streetcar and what, you increase the number of people who have a wage? Who cares, right? That has nothing to do with what I want, right? So this just feels like a random kind of connection. So I get rid of B. C, the proportion of working class men employed in factory positions located outside their immediate residential neighborhood, so maybe they have to commute, increased substantially after streetcar lines were constructed. So this is saying an increase in streetcars led to it's maybe commuting. It sounds like that. I mean, honestly, it doesn't say it, but the fact that I had a dumb summary that's giving me that idea is helping me see it even when they don't say it, right? Because we know the SAT is going to use different words to say the same thing. That's like the oldest trick in their book. They love to just change up the words and keep the same idea. So the fact that I'm like looking for something about commuting outside their immediate residential neighborhoods, yeah. So they're moving to a different place, like when they go to the factory. That seems reasonable. So let's look at D. Rent prices in working class neighborhoods served by streetcar routes remained stable between 1870 and 1900, while rents in areas without streetcar access declined markedly. So this is saying no streetcars, like this is basically saying an increase in streetcars didn't do anything, equals nothing. It didn't have any effect, right? So this is telling me streetcars don't matter, right? It remains stable. So maybe there's some connection to commuting here, but the fact that you're telling me that as you have more streetcars, nothing happens, that's not a good sign. I want the streetcar to have an effect. At this point, I would probably just pick C and move on. And that is the answer. So that's good. But I would say, in terms of sacrifices, right, we're trying to determine what's a good use of our time. Should I go back to choice A and read it again and try to talk myself into it being right or wrong? I don't know. For me, that hard math, the hard reading module is so tight for time that I tend to settle for good enough a lot on these questions. So for me, I was probably like 85 to 90% sure that C was going to be the answer. I'm aware that kind of like with that math question, there's a potential I'm falling for some sort of trap. It's possible. But like in this case, I didn't really understand A. It doesn't, I understand C well enough that I can pretty confidently connect it back to my dumb summary, which I'm pretty sure is right. So there's a lot of things going for me here. And a lot of what's going to have to happen on the hard reading module is you will need to think of your answer as placing a bet. You are not going to be able to, with the time constraint, get to 100% confidence in every answer. Unless someone has figured something out that I've never figured out. I think it's just too much work in too little time. So you have to think, where's that cutoff for me? Where do I get to a point where I'm confident enough in my answer? I could still be wrong, but the odds are good that I'm right. And you can always bookmark it and come back. But I would say you have to be able to understand where your cutoff is, where like reading it for another minute isn't going to necessarily change your answer and isn't going to really increase the chance of you getting it right. I would say that's a minute wasted. Better to sacrifice 15% confidence rather than a whole minute of time on a section where every single minute counts. So those are the things I want you guys thinking about because we still want to hopefully take one more practice test before our August SAT. And here's where you have already learned from your second practice test what your pacing is going to be like. And so for some people, they just really keep thinking, oh, if I can speed up more, if I can speed up more, I will solve everything. You are probably at the point where that you're hitting your limit. So there's little things you can do, but the big jumps, you're not going to get an extra 10 minutes. So you have to realize that you're working with a limited resource, time. And what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have to make sacrifices about which questions we cover. This would be one that I'm glad I didn't skip, right? This would be one I'd be happy I did because the passage isn't that long. It comes out and just says it, right? That's what I like about these support and weaken questions is they will say support the conclusion, support the hypothesis, support the claim, and then there will be a sentence in there that's just like this person claims. So you still have to read everything, but you at least know that's the part that matters most. So it focuses you in the right place. You're not going to be doing as much searching as you would for other questions. As always, feel free to ask questions if you've got them. But if not, let me move on to one where maybe we would make some choices about what to work on. Yeah, let's do this one. The other end of the spectrum for me is graph questions. I hate these. It's just maybe a personal thing, but I hate them. I find that they are very tedious and long. We're going to do it regardless. But when I think about my own sacrifices and I get to those graph questions, they're always the ones I'm leaving for last, unless it looks really simple. And this one does not. I've got three bars in two different places. I've got a long looking y-axis here, a long passage, pretty long choices. This feels like something that I don't want to get spending, I don't want to spend 5 minutes on. Maybe I could do two passages in that same amount of time that don't involve me going to a graph. So try your best here. I'll give some tips when we start going over it. But yeah, this would be one I'm probably marking for review even without solving it. And as you start sorting through the choices, these questions do involve two different things that might make a choice wrong or right. We have to think about the data in the graph or the chart and the passage and the information and ideas in that passage. So some of the choices we have to evaluate their accuracy. Other choices we have to evaluate their relevance to what the passage wants from us. So to me, that's what makes it so complicated is I got to do two things and I prefer to do one. And I don't like that. So yeah, try to take another minute, and then I'll start walking through my process here. I want you to see my process on something like this. Maybe it'll help. Or maybe you'll just come to the conclusion that they're just hard. All right, I feel like enough of you guys have answers that we can talk about it. So let's say, yep, last question. I've got 3 minutes left, and I'm hoping I can get through this. I'm definitely reading the passage first. I don't really try to interpret this graph in isolation. I don't really know what these mean. On easier ones, it might be fine, it might be obvious, but on hard ones, I just think there's sometimes misleading things about the graph, so it's hard. But the passage is also mostly just telling me the graph anyway. So, to investigate the potential benefits of listening to music for memory formation and retention, these people administered a series of tests to groups of students. Okay, great. Seems right. Like their testing periods. Okay, great. Each test was preceded by a 15-minute study period wherein students were asked to memorize an assortment of facts about fictional cities that the students would be asked to recall on the test. After a baseline study period and tests were administered in complete silence, the psychologist gave the students a second study period and test with either high or low tempo music playing. Okay, high, low, seems good. During the study period only, during the testing period only, or during both the study period and the testing period. Now that sounds like a lot of stuff to kind of keep in your brain, but just I'm always like checking up at the graph and being like, oh yeah, well, there you go. There's a bunch of boxes, they're labeled, and there's a high and a low, and they're separated. So, okay, that's just telling me what I see. And so now I see that more clearly. After analyzing the results, the psychologist concluded that playing music while studying improved memory retention, regardless of whether music was played during testing. So that's great. And notice what the question says. Which choice best describes data from the graph that weaken the psychologist's conclusion? So I'm definitely focused on this part, right? Concluded, conclusion, and I got to pay attention to the fact that we're weakening it. But let's get a quick little dumb summary here. Dumb summary. So what do they want? They're saying in the passage that studying music during studying is good. So let's go positive there, regardless of whether music played during testing. So this is saying the testing music, I usually use like a zero with a line through it. For doesn't matter, not relevant, something like that. So there you go. That's pretty good. Now, if I want to weaken that, well, what would I do? Well, I could say that the studying music was bad, right? So this is the conclusion, and then weaken it. I could say that the music was bad, or maybe that didn't matter. Maybe the testing music did matter. I don't know. There's a bunch of ways this could go, but I like having maybe some options that helps. So now I just go to the choices. The students who were played high or low tempo music during only the testing period had learning retention scores that were below the baseline. So, okay, that who were played higher low tempo music during only the testing period, so that's the one that's supposed to now matter, had learning retention scores that were below the baseline. That seems true. And this gets to another thing about the graph that's tricky is, well, what is the baseline, right? Learning retention score as percent of baseline. That's really weird. I have seen some questions like this on SATs. 100 is the baseline. Because what we're saying here is learning retention as percent of baseline. If it's 100% of the baseline, it's the same thing. So this is a graph that's meant to mislead. We tend to think of a baseline as zero, but this has 100 as a baseline. So when we're looking at this first box here, studying period only, right? That's 10% below the baseline. I think there's a choice about that. So we end up needing to understand the graph a little bit in order to understand even what these choices are saying. That's again what makes them hard is I just don't think that's intuitive. So for this choice, anyway, back to this choice, the students who were played high or low tempo music during only the testing period had learning retention scores that were below the baseline. So maybe that's getting to this. I don't really know. This is saying testing music is bad. I don't know. That doesn't seem like it's getting to the studying music being good. That seems to be much more their conclusion. So I'd leave it, but I don't love it. The students did not see an improvement in their retention when the low tempo music was played during both the studying and testing periods. So this one, studying and testing periods, the students did not see an improvement in their retention when the low tempo music, so low tempo, well, they did. So this is a good example where it's just wrong. It's just inaccurate. It's a false statement, right? Because the low tempo music, both studying and testing periods, has this gray bar and it's above 100, right? So it's a 20% increase. So to me, this is what makes it so hard is like now I'm using a different part of my brain evaluating the numbers rather than evaluating the kind of story. And that's just hard for me. So they did see an improvement. This is just false. Those are for most people the ones that seem easiest to eliminate, but I don't know. That's just not how my brain works. So you pick your poison, I guess. C, playing high tempo music during only the study period resulted in a 10% reduction in students' learning retention. So first of all, is that true? High tempo, only the study period. High tempo, only the study period. Yes, 10% reduction. So that is true, right? Because they went from 100 to now 90% retention. So it's true, right? In terms of the accuracy, is it relevant? Well, it sounds like the study period now is bad because they lost memory, they lost retention, right? So that seems wrong, or that seems bad. Whereas what they were trying to conclude before is that's good. So this is both true and probably relevant. This seems pretty good, but I'd still be nervous enough. I might check it off, but I don't know. D, for students who played music during the study period, playing high tempo music during testing made them more accurate, whereas playing low tempo music during testing made them less accurate. Well, one thing I don't know is accuracy even measured on this graph? Maybe it's in here. I don't know. But if I get down to my dumb summary, sometimes a dumb summary is going to about what's in the passage. Sometimes we can also dumb summarize the choices, especially if we're doing like a kind of relationship thing. This is comparing the high versus low. Notice that was never really part of this. And that's the thing is it really doesn't matter. It's just a way to confuse us. It's just an extra dimension to this graph. That's not what their conclusion was about. So this is making a comparison that we don't really need. So I would absolutely keep this bookmark. But C is the answer here. The problem with A really is we want to focus on the studying thing, regardless of whether the music was played during testing. This is still basically a statement about when music was played during studying. So this is secondary. It's really the studying thing that's better. And so C is about the music playing during studying. It is saying that it made people dumber for some reason in this particular situation. So that is going against what it says. But oh my God, was all that worth it? That's 10 points, maybe 20 on our test. That's it, right? So part of the sacrifice strategy is recognizing that the hard questions are not worth so much more than the easy and medium ones. So the master of the middle step we did last week is much more important for a score because those easy and medium questions are easier to get. And an easy question and a medium question versus a hard, they're all worth the same thing. So yes, we just want to maximize the overall points. And at a certain point, in order to keep adding points to your score, you need to get these kind of crazy hard ones right. But if you're getting a lot of easy and medium ones wrong still, oh, throw this overboard. This is not a good use of your time. Um, Plus, remember to add in another important piece of this, our pacing in the reading section, our strategy there is there's 27 questions. We're starting with number 15 because that's where the grammar is. And so we want to get the most points possible. So we're starting with 15. We're working through the grammar questions, the transitions, the outlines. Then we're going back to number 1 to do the vocab. All those things are fast. So we're going to end with the passages because we know that those are the biggest time suck on the test. But within the passages, there's no order to it. It's not like the easy ones are first in the passages and the hard ones are later. It's all mixed up. So your judgment about what to do, it's not like math. We know where the hard questions are going to be. You're going to have to look at things and judge for yourself whether within a few seconds you think it's going to be worth your time. So what the worst thing you can do is read it, do it for a minute and a half, and then give up on it. You really want to make snap judgments about this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm not going to do. For me, it's pretty easy. If it's about graphs, I'm not doing it, and I'll save it for last. And hopefully I'll have time, but if not, no big deal. Let's do one more. And this is one more passage. We got plenty of time, but I want to do one more passage at least. This is one I really like. This is one that looks insane. Science, people hate that. But it's a logically completes one. Even before I read it, I see a big old however right in the middle. And remember, the most important word in any passage is but. So I know that they're telling me important stuff because of that however. So this would be one where I would make a choice. I'd rather do this than that graph question. Let's see what you guys think after you do it. Dumb summary really going to help here too. Mostly because those choices are crazy long. I want to know what I'm going to be looking for in those choices before I get to them. Getting some answers here. And if you are done, I'm going to ask for your vote. Do you want to do one more passage after this one or go back to math? So you can just type in the chat passage or math. Either way, we'll have time for a math, but I'm curious if you guys want to do one more passage or if this has been quite a lot. And while you do that, since most of you guys are starting to get answers in, I think it's good to know too in these passages what you should be paying attention to. This first sentence is just nothing. Bacterial cultures that produce streptomycin, a widely used antibiotic, have been the subject of extensive research aimed at improving production efficiency. Who cares? I don't care. Many researchers believe there's a positive correlation. Ooh, I care about that between the concentration of zinc sulfate added to bacterial cultures and the amount of streptomycin produced, given zinc's known role as a cofactor in several metabolic enzymes that enhance the pathways responsible for antibiotic synthesis. Well, I don't care about most of that sentence, but positive correlation means as one thing goes up, the other thing goes up, right? So what are the things? Zinc sulfate, so okay, zinc, a correlation between that and the amount of streptomycin. So streptomycin, SM, do it that way. Cool. Well, that seems like a nice thing. And I love that they start with like many researchers believe. Already, because of my experience with these passages, I get the sense that we're gonna counteract that in some way. And then sure enough, the very next thing is, however, this person conducted a controlled experiment that yielded unexpected results. There, however, unexpected, both of those words are emphasizing that this probably isn't true. Using standardized bacterial populations across identical growth conditions, Forecastle systematically varied zinc sulfate concentrations from 0.5 to 8.0 millimolar and measured streptomycin output at 24-hour intervals. Barely understand what that means, but if it's unexpected, I would expect that we're going to flip this in some way. That if you increase the zinc, you're going to somehow maybe decrease the streptomycin, or maybe that we just break this entirely and we end up with there is no correlation at all. There's just randomness to it. But either way, I really want to have this idea in my head as I go through these choices, because look at these things. Good Lord. But let's see how well they conform to this kind of standard here. A. Her data revealed that cultures maintained at 6 millimolar zinc sulfate concentrations exhibited enhanced metabolic flux through secondary biosynthetic pathways, resulting in a 40% increase in streptomycin yield compared to unsupplemented controls. Well, 6 millimolar seems high for this kind of random thing that they gave me. So that's the high end. So that seems like there's more zinc, and especially since we're comparing it to unsupplemented controls, that's like a zero, I guess, or something low. And that results in a 40% increase in streptomycin. Well, that's kind of what they started with. That's kind of what they said originally. But remember, we have, however, we want to flip it, right? So this feels like a trap. This feels, I understand what they're saying, but I'm missing the key part of the passage. That's why I always say most important word in any passage is but. However, it's just a bigger but. That's all. I know how that sounds. I don't care. B. Zinc sulfate deficiency below 1 millimolar severely impaired cellular respiration pathways, with cultures showing streptomycin biosynthesis that decreased linearly as zinc concentrations fell below physiologically adequate levels. Well, all I understand in that is zinc is dropping, right? Fell below. 1 is lower end of this thing. And then they're saying that streptomycin decreased. So at first glance, let me go back up. That looks pretty good. Because, right, we had up and up, but notice that when I flipped it, I didn't flip them both. I flipped one, right? Because a positive correlation does not mean that both things must increase. It just means that both things move in the same direction, right? So choice B is still a positive correlation, even though both arrows are going down, that they're still moving in the same direction. One thing correlates with the other. They're moving in the same way. So that's a sneaky thing too. They know that we'll see the downs and think of it that way and be like, oh yeah, that we're flipping it. But what we really want is for them to be in opposite directions. That's a negative or inverse correlation. So B, I'd be very confident is also wrong. C, zinc sulfate concentrations exceeding 4 millimolar consistently triggered upregulation of stress response genes, leading to a proportional decrease in streptomycin biosynthesis as zinc levels increase. Well, again, I barely understand it, but you're telling me zinc is increasing and streptomycin is going down, right? A proportional decrease as zinc increased. Sounds pretty darn good. Seems like what I want. But obviously, I gotta look at D. Maybe there's some more to this, right? I don't understand the science. Maybe there's more to it. Zinc sulfate proved superior to other cofactors. Well, that just dropped a magic word on me. Other. Talk about that in a sec. In several metabolic enzymes demonstrating greater efficacy in promoting streptomycin production than previously tested copper or manganese supplements. Well, that also sounds like zinc is good and it's helping, right? It's promoting the production. So if I did have to force this in there, it seems like more zinc is good. So probably more of this thing. But it's the word other that really bothers me. And this is one of those words that there's no word that is always 100% wrong on any SAT. You can't just get rid of a choice because of a word. But other is one of those that scares me a bit because it gets to that small versus big trap, right? This is a small passage, even though it's made up of lots of words. It's small because it's about one particular relationship between the zinc sulfate thing and the streptomycin, and I can't make other assumptions about other things, right? I don't know what a cofactor is, but this seems to be bringing in other cofactors. So why are we going from the small example of zinc sulfate to this bigger world of all the cofactors that might exist? I don't know. I'm not allowed to make those kinds of leaps. So this one, this maybe this part is wrong as well, but it's really that word other that stands out to me right away. And so I see everyone, a lot of people change their answers, but no big deal. There you go. This feels like a good example, though, where I'm helped by the trap answers in addition to all these arrows. But this would be a great one to do. I know it looks really bad at first glance, but it just goes to show if you know what you're looking for in these passages, it's not always the case that the ones that have these intense science words are going to be very hard because the words that we care about might be really obvious. Positive correlation, that is a huge gift for us. It really makes it easy to understand what's going on. Cool. Any other questions on this? This is a good. I would not mark for this for review. I would be very confident answer. This would be one I'd be glad I did and very confident that I'm right. All right, we only had one vote and it was for a passage, so that's what we're doing. This one is not science so much as, well, economics. That's science, I guess. I don't know. But it's a main idea. These tend to be early on in the passages, and I tend to do these because those trap answer ideas tend to work a lot with these, but this one also has some hard words, so do your best. I would definitely say that my reasoning here will rely heavily on noticing words in the choices that I understand and that I know are strong. So there's a lot of stuff I don't understand. But the words that matter most in a passage and a choice, they're almost always going to be words that the definitions of, that they're very easy words and they have a lot of meaning. And so we got to make sure that meaning is justified by something in the passage. So you shouldn't have to just feel this one out. There should be reasons to your choices, what you're picking and what you're getting rid of, especially what you're getting rid of. All right, I see a bunch of answers. So here's what I would take away from this passage. I think this is a good example of, especially as your scores start going up more and more, the things that are going to matter for your process if you are trying to get these harder questions right, those are going to be the things that my videos are really good at because I explain every little thing in my process. And so that's usually stuff that feels kind of overwhelming at first, but those little changes to what you notice and what you pay attention to and what you write down, those things can make a big difference. And you'll never see the same passage twice, but you will see the same patterns. So I would just say, if you're really struggling with the passages, my videos, yeah, it's a lot of talking, but they're good. They're really good for understanding how I think about things. So let's talk about this one. The phenomenon of sticky wages, the tendency for employee compensation to remain relatively constant despite fluctuations in broader economic conditions, has long puzzled economists who expected labor markets to behave more like commodity markets where prices adjust rapidly to supply and demand pressure. So this might be where I'm like, okay, it's sticky wages, something is unexpected, right? Strong word, right? I don't know what sticky wages are, but I know what it means for something to be unexpected, right? They're puzzled, they expect it to behave a certain way, right? Oh, there it is, and it doesn't. So that's the strong word that doesn't require much knowledge of economics. That's a pretty basic word. Behavioral economist George Akerlof and his colleagues have proposed that this wage rigidity stems from workers' concerns about fairness and reciprocity within employment relationships. Okay, so they're explaining it. According to their efficiency wage theory, employers deliberately maintain wages above market clearing levels because doing so fosters employee loyalty and productivity, ultimately reducing costly turnover and monitoring expenses that would offset any savings from wage cuts during economic downturns. So Akerlof has an explanation. That would be my dumb summary. I don't know what the explanation means. I'm not going to waste my brain power trying to figure it out. Let's see how much of it matters for the choices. So that's it. Literally, right? I call them dumb summaries for a reason. I'm playing dumb. I don't know what's going on. Choice A. Although sticky wages have historically been seen as evidence of inefficient labor markets, inefficient? That's a strong word. Akerlof's research demonstrates that wage rigidity actually reflects optimal pricing strategies that benefit both employers and employees. It's a great example of just, I don't necessarily know all this other stuff, but it's evidence of inefficient labor markets. That has a very negative connotation. And then later on, optimal means like the best pricing strategy. It sounds like he's explaining it, but is this the best pricing strategy or is this just what it is? I don't love those words. So this feels like a lot of just kind of information about this theory. I don't get this very strong negative and positive here. So yeah, I'll just write one word, optimal. That word scares me. I'm not going to cross it out, but I don't love it. B, economists have struggled to explain sticky wages. Yes, that's true, because they've ignored the psychological factors that influence employment relationships. Well, did they ignore them? I don't know, but that word stands out to me, right? So I can go back. Look, I'm not going back to reread everything. I'm going back to hunt. I'm hunting. Did they ignore stuff? They've been puzzled. They expected them to behave a certain way. Are they saying that they ignored this stuff? That's a bigger claim. And then we finish this up, right? An omission that Akerlof sought to remedy with his research on efficiency wage theory. Well, did he seek to remedy it, or is that just how it just explains it? I mean, he did all this research for the purpose of explaining this. I don't know. I don't know. These could be words I have to settle for, but they're words that stand out. I understand what it means to ignore something. I understand what it means to have an intent to do something, to seek something out. So those are ideas that need to be proven. C, the efficiency wage theory provides a behavioral explanation for why wages remain stable during economic fluctuations. That's so very vague. I love it. It provides a behavioral explanation, does it? Well, it says something because of loyalty and productivity. So where there was more about it, right? Workers' concerns. Okay. Sounds the employers deliberately maintain wages. That sounds behavioral. So yeah, okay. Suggesting that employers maintain higher wages because the resulting benefits outweigh the costs. Again, that's so beautifully vague. That says nothing at all. The benefits outweigh the costs. It doesn't mention the benefits. It doesn't mention the costs. It just says it's a net positive. Does that seem to be what they're saying here? It reduces costly turnover and monitoring expenses, and that would offset any savings from wage cuts. Yeah, okay. Oh, it's so vague. I love it. Now, I'm not going to pick it, but We got to look. We got to keep going to D. While Akerlof's efficiency wage theory successfully explains sticky wages in most industries, oh boy, oh boy, nope, hate it. Right? Do we talk about industries? Are we starting to quantify things? I do not like this choice already. But let's finish it. Let's see. Maybe it has a redeeming quality. It fails to account for wage flexibility observed in commodity sectors where employee loyalty is less important. This is also making a comparison between the commodity sector, which I know they talked about, but doesn't seem like part of Akerlof's thing. So I don't know. Seems random. This is the one I'm most confident crossing out. But at this point, right, I've probably got 90 seconds left on the clock. I'm picking C and I'm seeing what happens. And lucky for me, I'm right this time. I'd probably bookmark it. But because I know what I'm looking for in the passage, regardless of whether the topic is some weird chemical or some planet or some economic theory, I know what the right answers tend to sound like and what the wrong answers tend to sound like as well. And so I can ignore, filter out a lot of these details that I know I'm not supposed to know about. You don't need to take an economics class to do good on the SAT. But if you know what a right answer sounds like, you can notice too when other words that we do know the definitions of are sneaking in and strengthening a choice. And it's so weird to accept that, right? The reason A and B are wrong is that they're strong. The reason C is right is that it's weak. When your English teacher asks you to summarize something, write an essay on something, the teacher is always saying, give more detail, back it up, be specific, right? That's what we think a good summary is going to do is it's going to have a strong thesis. It's going to take a position. It's going to do all those things. But on the SAT, the stronger the choice, the more it says, the greater the chance that one of those pieces is wrong. And so here, I don't really have anything that like contradict this. I think in D I do. I think in D I can be very clear. No, they're not comparing the different markets. But the problem with A isn't so much that optimal is like provably wrong. It's just that this is a claim that goes beyond what the passage is saying. I don't know if they are actually doing that. I don't know that they're saying this is the best pricing strategy. That's really a big claim that needs to be backed up. Did they ignore the psychological factors or did they just have trouble explaining things, right? Those are different claims. And so you just have to accept that an answer might be right because it barely says anything at all, right? It says almost nothing, then there's almost nothing that could be wrong with it. So that takes some help, some kind of changing in your perspective. But for me, that's why these kind of complicated passages I end up targeting. I'd still rather do this than one of those graph questions, because at least this, I only have to focus on the passage. And I do know that the choices are going to be about the words and the choices. They're not going to force me to keep scrolling back up to some graph and checking numbers. That to me is very difficult for my brain. Cool. Any questions on this one? We're going to do one more, probably one more. Let's do a geometry. I feel like that's pretty good. I like this one. Yeah, let's do this one. Cool. Now, first thing, before we start going on a tangent that we make a mistake on, what is a pyramid? You got to know. Pyramid, guys, that's this guy. That's the pointy one. The number of people who confuse a pyramid with a prism, oof, rough, scary. Know the shapes. There's a quiz in here on the shapes somewhere. Quiz, geometry, shapes. Do the shapes quiz. Learn the shapes. So that's one thing I'd notice, right? Pyramid, know what shape you're dealing with. But also notice there's X's. X's in the choices. Oop, it's supposed to be a W. I'll fix that. But X's in the question. So pretend that those are both the same letter. That's what they were supposed to be. I'll fix it right now. Can't find it, so we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. You can see behind the curtain. Boom, fixed. Oof, it's very blurry. The no surface area is scary. But remember, it's just we're taking a 3D shape and we're flattening it out. So what do we have here? Right? We have a square on the bottom and four triangles. So if you can't find the area of a square and you can't find the area of a triangle, we've got a problem. If you follow up on that and say, well, the issue is there's all these x's. I never finished that thought, but there's x's in the question, there's x's in the choices. Does the x really matter? No. Arithmetize. Make up a number. Don't juggle the formula and the process and the letters. Just make some numbers up. That's what I'm going to do. Can we make it 2? Let's see. All right. Square plus 4 triangles. You've all got the square. 2, 2, 4. It's the triangle. That's the bit. That's the hard one. I'm gonna need a different color here. Okay. Since we're almost out of time, I will give the hint earlier on that in order to find, you can see the height that they give us here inside this pyramid is not the height that we would need for the triangles, right? So if I think about the area of a triangle, that is also in the reference chart. And you can see the height is got to be perpendicular to the base and it's got to be in the triangle, right? So this height that they give us is in the pyramid, but the triangle is a flat shape that's kind of on the outside. So 1/2 base times height, it's not the same height. I have the base of 2. I don't have that height. But the benefit sometimes of plug points into equations is it tells me what I need. It helps me understand it. And so what I need is I need a flat height on the outside of that pyramid. And now suddenly, ooh, connect some dots, right? If I connect that dot, what did I just make? I made a different triangle. And so that gives me something to hopefully solve for. That triangle is a right triangle. We can see that with the right triangle symbol that's right there. And so, well, what's this leg? If I can get that, I can get the hypotenuse, and it's 1, right? Because that's half the distance across. So well, let's do it over here. 1 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared. So 1 plus 4 is c squared. So let's do it down here. 5 is c squared. So root 5 is c. We can already start to maybe see where the answer is going to go. Hopefully it's d. But let's take a look, right? So the area of a triangle is half base times height. We now have the height. Half of 2 is 1, so that's root 5. And, well, it's literally just 4 plus 4 root 5. what choice gives me that? Well, we can see that the root 5 is only in choice D, so that's pretty good. But if we recognize that what did we make x in the first place? We made it 2, right? So 2 squared is 4, plus 2 squared is 4 root 5. So it works out great. So this question that's scary at first ends up being not so bad. And that's because, again, I talked a little bit about this at the beginning, the idea of moves, right? I don't want you to memorize the steps to solve the surface area of a pyramid. But we have moves, right? Draw pictures. That's a good move in geometry, is get it on the page. And you can't screenshot like I just did, but you could draw a rough pyramid. Again, they show it to you in the reference chart that's there for every math question. So they don't call it a pyramid, they don't label it, but it's this one. And so you can start by drawing that in your Scratch. And then plug points into equations is great. I write down any formulas that I think I'm going to need. But also a good move for three-dimensional shapes or any real shape that seems weird and annoying is that actually it's composed of simple shapes. Squares, rectangles, triangles, circles in certain cases. So I'm always thinking, can I find those things? That makes it really easy because I know how to deal with a triangle. I know how to deal with a rectangle. Those are easy. So the pyramid is just this kind of weird combination of the basic stuff. And that gets what we talked about last time. If you don't know what a pyramid is, if you don't know how to find the area of a triangle, then yeah, you're going to be in a lot of trouble when it gets to this level of difficulty. But if you can confidently do those little steps that show up in the easy and medium questions, then this isn't so bad. It requires patience and recognizing which of those little steps matter, but it's not so bad in the grand scheme of things. So this would be one that I'd probably skip at first, if only just because I'm a little worried sometimes with geometry that it might be a time suck. They tend to have a lot of steps involved, even if they're relatively easy steps. So I'd be nervous about that. I'd probably leave this for last. Look for some Desmos opportunities, look for some plug points and equations opportunities. But I would hopefully be able to come back to this and I wouldn't be too scared of it. And to me, the arithmetize absolutely helps because then I don't have to carry this weird X all the way through. I can just be like, all right, let's make it a number. That way I can also enter things in the calculator. And that makes it just a little bit easier. So anytime you see a letter in a question and a letter in the choice, odds are good the letter doesn't matter. So those are quick, we talked about this last week too, those are quick arithmetize opportunities, moments when you really want to pounce and use that strategy. Cool. So I will obviously stick around for questions, but one thing before you go, this is our last week and a half-ish before the test. So if we think about where we are in our steps, we just did step 8, which has lots of tough things. Anything that says twists, just extremely difficult, as it says. Those are going to be things where you might get very frustrated. Give them a shot, try as best you can, work on whatever questions seem to be the ones you have the best chance at, and start to think about it as you go through. If I saw something like this on the test, would I do it? And then step 9 is also part of this week's homework, is your third and final practice test. So this is really important. Everyone needs to take a practice test before their SAT. I see plenty of you did take your second practice test. If you have questions about your performance or anything, feel free to let me know. Chat me in this little this platform here, this portal. And the third practice test, though, it's like your dress rehearsal. So really try to make sure that it feels like the real test. You should hopefully improve a little bit from your second practice test, but the goal is you want to really make it feel like the real thing, like a dress rehearsal. I do notice that some of you have not taken any practice tests. That's insane to call you out a little bit. I'm not going to name names, but you know who you are. If you have not taken a practice test and you were taking an SAT in a week and a half, oh boy, you gotta do it. You cannot show up on that Saturday without having taken a test and sat there for the 2.5 hours and gotten that experience. You are walking into a disaster if you do that. So you have to take a test. You have to get it out of your system. You have to feel what the pacing is like. That is mandatory. I also see that very few of you, this applies to way more than just the practice test people, very few of you have looked at these vocab words. So go in here. This is especially if you're getting vocab questions wrong, so you don't understand some basic words. It's a great example of where you should go. And my advice is just hit the new and shuffle and just start looking at some random words and say, oh, I've seen that one before, and try to add them into your master list. And if not, you can go to the studying list and kind of still build that up. The vocab words, that's a great thing to be doing the last couple days before your SAT. We want to start resting our brain as we get to that. So we'll talk more about this next week, but don't wait for next week's class to start step 10, which is revisit and refresh. Basically, anything that you feel iffy on, anything that you feel like you've forgotten, especially as you take that third practice test, those would be things to start going back to. Maybe study a little bit of those topics before you take that last practice test. There's lots of good stuff you can do. Just because you've done an exercise already doesn't mean it just gets shelved. You might need to go back to it and redo it. So a grammar rule that you don't remember quite very well. So all that stuff we want to be doing. And then as we basically get to next week's class, we're going to start to taper off. I don't want anyone really studying a ton the Friday before their SAT. So you want to make sure you've done that cramming a couple of days before, because Friday night, you want to rest your brain. And the easiest way to do that is to be ready before Friday night. You want to have that kind of out of your system, any sort of worry, any sort of things that you want to do last minute. Make sure we're starting to get that done in the next week. So any questions, anything like that, feel free to ask. If not, you're free to go. And again, as always, I'm here if you need me for questions. Just give me a chat. Yeah, and check this because I had that new feature. So very cool. Cool. But yeah, sorry if today was a little scary. That was kind of the point. But remember, it's all good. We're trying to optimize our points. So these might have all been questions on the real test you'd skip. But
Hey,
yes.
thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Very welcome. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I mean, you got one? You're usually good for a question. No, nothing? I mean, you there? Oh, maybe. Chat. Okay. Yep. You're the only one here, so I'll just talk. Any tips from you? I've had 1410, 1400. Okay. Nope. No, you're good. Hold on. Let me read it. Around that range, but trying to hit 15. I've done most of the practice, but I don't know what else to do. Okay. So good question. Hard question to answer. So certainly you're probably getting some of these twisted questions wrong. So don't let the difficulty of these sets put you down if you feel like you're getting like 50% right at best. That's okay. The point of all these twists is to kind of give you those, to exercise those skills of like flexibility, creativity, just being able to dive into a question without needing a plan. And I think we saw a lot of that tonight. I mean, I tried to be open about it, is I do not know what I'm doing on a lot of these hard questions. I start out with a step because I just need something to do and I don't like staring at a question. So that's sometimes where people have trouble going from 1400 to 1500 is they like to have a plan, and when they can't find one, they don't do anything on a question. And I don't think it's possible to get a 1500 if you're timid about the strategies or any of that stuff. So that's speaking more to today's lesson a little bit. That also works in the passages. I come out of passages having no idea what I just read. And I'm like, okay, well, let's go to the choices. And hopefully you can do some of the things I do where you're looking and saying, all right, I don't know what's going on, but I know this word is important. This word says a lot. This is a strong word. So that helps me a lot in the passages. That there's lots of, I mean, if you have any sense of where, you feel like you're losing the easiest points, you've got about 200 left, where are the easiest 100? To get a 1500, basically, you need to be perfect or close to it on pretty much any skill that shows up in the test, which is hard. So you can't get anything wrong because you don't have it memorized, right? Really, to get a 1500, especially with the reading section, you got to be pretty close to perfect on the grammar, transitions, and outlines. And that really also needs to take you about 10 minutes without any errors. So it's got to be fast. And that will get you plenty of time, hopefully, for the passages and the vocab. That also might mean that it's really time to start studying the vocab really intensely, because if you have to guess randomly on 2 or 3 vocab questions because you don't know the definitions of the words, well, that's throwing points away. You might get it right, you might guess right, but you're giving up control of those points. and that's not ideal. In math, you also want to be moving fast through the questions we have that are predictable. So in the hard module, I say you really want to get through questions 1 through 14 in 14 minutes. So not 1 minute per question, because some of them will take less than that, but that you really want to save as much time for the 15 to 22. So if you're hitting those targets, then yeah, let's see, you're saying you're improving much more. You're struggling in the math. Well, in the math, is it because of, do you feel like there's stuff you haven't memorized? Geometry is a place where there's a lot of stuff, it seems. Statistics, we haven't talked super much about. Actually, yes, we did. We did that a couple weeks ago. The math, though, are you making careless mistakes? Are you getting something wrong in like number 10? Regardless of the module, that's a preventable mistake. I don't care what the question is, that's preventable. So part of getting better at math also might be the sacrifices thing of recognizing that you might need to completely guess on two questions and not even look at them for the sake of spending that time that you would have struggled to get through them on other things that you can get right, where the strategies really work. So that can feel frustrating to just be like, I'm completely giving up on two questions without even looking at them. But I think it's essential that you have a sacrifice plan where you're like, okay, that time is better spent locking up points elsewhere. So are you making careless mistakes? Are you, where else? I mean, I don't remember exactly how you were doing on today's questions, but those math questions were hard. We want to get at least a few of them right. So yeah, anything more you can tell me about the math, where you're getting stuff wrong? And I think it's, oh, okay, here it is. Careless mistakes. So geometry, I think you're gonna learn a lot. I would make sure with geometry that I would even just go to here first and exercise it. Well, videos too. There's a lot of lessons on the geometry here. But I would say exercises, you're gonna see the ones that are written by me that tend to target specific topics. The question bank ones are also very good. These haven't been showing up with the study plan steps, but I would do one of these basic ones if you haven't. And I can even check. I'll put it on this screen so it's not showing up in here. Give me a sec. But I would say that even the basics ones, if you're getting any of those wrong, then it might be a memorization issue, that you're just having trouble with something that's supposed to be about just knowing a formula, knowing a rule. Yeah, so I see you haven't done those, which is fine. It's not like it was an assigned homework, but these would be really good if geometry is your problem. Start with the basic ones. Just it's going to be a mix. See, am I getting anything wrong because I don't know a fact? That would be bad. But it's also very easy to fix. So that's good in that sense. And then the geometry twists written by me are going to be the top tier hard questions. The geometry twists mix written by the College Board, the question bank, those are still hard. You might want to start with those first, but those will be a little bit more conquerable. Some of them will be nasty, but there'll be more of, okay, we're just dipping our toe into that water of problem solving, right? We're not getting to as insane of a level as maybe the surface area of the pyramid. That's maybe a little bit harder. So these would be good too. I think the first two or three have videos explanations, so they're pretty good. And then you could do more of these like geometry twists that I wrote and see. And I would think, regardless, Carol's mistakes, that's the priority. Cut those out. Anything where you misread something and that's why you got it wrong, where you did an arithmetic mistake and got it wrong, that you got to fix because the way the scoring system works, they're also going to, if you're making careless mistakes, I think it hurts you more than if you get a hard question wrong. So you were better off saving question number 3, which is easy, than worrying about question number 20, which is hard. I think 3 is going to hurt you more than 20. So those careless mistakes are more important. And then I think I was going to make another point and I lost it. Yeah. I feel like I lost my train of thought on that, but I think the stuff in this sacrifices one is going to be good because there's quadratic twists, statistics twists, all sorts of weird stuff. A lot of that is about that kind of problem solving puzzles, being able to recognize which topics matter. It's that kind of like cleverness that isn't really taught in school. So if you're in an advanced math class in school, that's great, but it almost hurts you in certain ways because it makes you very formulaic in your thinking and you memorize steps to solve things. And oh, the teacher's going to give me a question for homework and a similar question is going to appear in the test. So if I memorize how to solve that homework question, then the test question is going to be the same thing. Just repeat that process. SAT doesn't work like that. So it is about that kind of cleverness and creativity that we don't really see in school. That's a very long-winded answer for your very long-winded question, as you said. But is there any more to add
Thank,
to it?
no, thank you.
Okay, cool. Feel free to chat me as things come up, especially if there's specific questions that you feel are really frustrating you. Feel free to let me know. I might be able to give more insight based on that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Cool. No problem. Have a good one.
You